So good morning. Thanks, Waid. Yeah, let's just touch base. I won't bore you with too much details. Obviously, there's a lot of details that's still fairly sensitive. Obviously, this is it's not the first incident. This has come over the last 2 years, as we indicated before, with Colonel Roberts and the STF members that successfully foiled the previous incident as well as this incident. And yeah, I guess we've all experienced a similar fate, I guess in some point, be it facility or during the transportation segment. We were fortunate, I guess, in this instance once again, and I guess it's all part and parcel of the network that sits here. You know, it's other freight forwarders sharing information, sharing trends, the law enforcement agencies, and obviously the security companies that performs several functions there. And then obviously also the last, in terms of there was no honor amongst thieves. Luckily, one of the FPs came forward with some of the information, obviously, and just to see how long this has taken. This has taken 2 to 3 months in terms of their planning, and it just shows you the diligence they had to perform this. To plan a heist of this magnitude, I guess, for 2 to 3 months, not getting that putting financials in, because obviously they need to pay all these various staff that they've bought off, so to say. So what we've dissected, so after the incident, we basically kind of dissected it in certain aspects. And we've broken it down to the following points. So obviously the logistical planning behind it, from their side, obviously the 2 to 3 months. The surveillance and the monitoring this time around was key. They've actually monitored and put surveillance on key personnel in the operation that could potentially disrupt it. So for 2 to 3 months, Colonel Roberts, myself, and other members had tails on us to see what our day-to-day operation what we do from a day-to-day, where we are, what uniform we wear, what cars we drive, are we armed, are we not armed? And then obviously in terms of the resource planning that they had the agility to adapt 20 minutes before the robbery, to change a vehicle, to change the branding of a vehicle. So when the vehicle arrived, the actual branding on the vehicle was still hot off the press, so to say. You could feel the physical branding had just been printed. And this was obviously because the first truck that they had a starting issue. And they actually managed to quickly change number plates and then change the vehicle. Obviously, in terms of the recruitment, what we found is, and I guess it's a lot of us in the industries experience a similar fate, and that's labor brokering. So yes, we need labor brokering from time to time to fill in for casuals a year, but what we've realized is these syndicates has infiltrated the labor brokers. So I might need a few staff to fill in for a specific role. Swissport Warehouse might need a certain labor broker to fill in, the guards at the gate, and at the end of the day, these syndicates are placing these members in these key roles without our knowledge, so to say. So at the end of the day, they actually have the upper hand on us. In terms of uniforms, also uniforms brand new, correctly printed, and once again, it just shows the agility. Because they changed the branding on the truck, they had a spare set and they could revert to that. Reflectors printed, everything the same. And then also the actual concealment in the vehicle. So how they built up the pallets already, and obviously had multiple resources, 2 or 3 vehicles ready for that. And it's not a question of, you can do it in an hour or in 2 hours. This was basically done and shifted within 10 minutes. The pallets were shifted, professionally built, obviously to conceal all of them in the back of it. So what we've seen is also, obviously, the contingencies that we've learned out of this. Obviously, Waid spoke about control of information. I guess it's difficult for us as freight forwarders and transporters. Yes, we need a certain set of documents. Unfortunately, some of these documents, track and trace, all these websites are freely accessible by, you just need the master airwayable number. So just as we sit with track and trace teams, they also have track and trace teams. They knew, for instance, in this shipment, that this shipment was offloaded 3 times. So they had planned for 3 days, 3 consecutive days, and they were checking to see whether this cargo would arrive. In terms of the actual documentation that they had on scene, it was impeccable. And once again, it just shows you the agility, because as they changed the branding of the vehicle, the documents branding was also changed. So they obviously had a template format somewhere, and someone quickly printed all these documents. Window period, obviously they know, it's predictable. You know, for valuable, vulnerable cargo, I guess in the high-tech field, they know that no general cargo warehouse wants that cargo, so they know it needs to move from flight arrival between 2 to 3 hours, so that's their window period. Yeah, and then also, and I guess for us in terms of the other contingencies, is where we as an industry historically used to screen polygraph, voice stress analysis every 6 months. It just showed us, you know, that we've tested staff, and within 2 months, obviously they were all engaged and all bought by these syndicates. So yeah, it's also changing those patterns, and it's also changing our schedules and our own equipment, not to become predictable. So change vehicles, we're changing our vehicles, changing branding on the vehicles. Today it might be a security vehicle, tomorrow it might be a logistics vehicle. But yeah, it's, I guess, like we all sit here, they all sit in the same boardroom and obviously plan the next heist. That's it. Yeah, I won't share too much details. Obviously, as the previous speakers have already spoken about the state of national state of disaster, I guess that's also aiding the criminal element. You know, the constant power outages, GSM that's out, towers that's out, it becomes our vulnerability. It affects our visibility to a certain degree, and yeah, it makes it difficult for us to plan ahead. That's it. Any questions?
Martin, thank you very much for that. Has anybody got any questions? Not. Martin, I've got one. So
Sure.
you mentioned that syndicates approach employees, which I think a lot of people have probably heard of. What in your opinion can be done to identify this before it happens?
Yeah, and I guess what we've seen is, you know, is to do that random polygraph and voice stress analysis. You know, we used to do it every 6 months or every 3 months, but it's become the norm, and unfortunately it's one of those hidden security costs that none of us, you know, really budget for, but it's to almost do it on a monthly basis, because the agility for these guys and the reaction times, it's so quick, and that's the only way that you really pick it up. I mean, it's not to say that it is that, but it gives you an indication to start digging and to see where to look at.
Okay, so you answered my second question. So preventing is probably the key here.
Yeah.
Identifying can be a little bit more challenging, knowing if somebody's been infiltrated or not.
Yeah, the same, you know. I mean, you do a criminal check. I mean, he might have a clean criminal record now, but I mean, he's committed a crime 3 days later, you know. So when you do it, you don't actually know what this employee is. So as much as you do a lifestyle audit and all that, the only way for us to kind of know is to do those voice stress analysis and polygraph tests to give you some sort of an idea. It's not concrete, or it's not foolproof, but it's just an idea to work off.
Thank you.
That's it.
Yes, my name is Lauren Smith. I'm the General Manager for G4S Aviation. Are you talking about the specific incident which happened at Foreign Airlines?
That's good.
So how did AXA fail us on the access control?
And I guess this is once again, and this is what Wade also mentioned, you know, it's an email, you know, so if everyone in the admin team, and they've had almost sleeper agents in all these departments, you know, from an admin perspective, the personnel that sends and receives the emails to allow these trucks to come in. Unfortunately, they were also in this instant compromised. So they'd already sent that, they were able to send that email to the gate to allow them in. And I mean, it's only an email, so you don't need that IVS or the AXA permit. You can come in with an email at the gate, and then you've gained access to the terminal. What happens inside the terminal, obviously they had multiple other agents that was already bought off, and they had the documentation, so to say. That's the biggest problem, you know, it is, and that's that control of information. As much as we try and control it, it's in the public domain to a certain degree, and it's up to the integrity of those key personnel that's in possession of that, what they do with it. You know, to buy it off for 2,000 Rand, to send an email for 1,000 Rand, and that's what we found. I mean, it even got so far as to the actual cleaner in one of the warehouses was a surveillance agent, and he's been there in both instances. He's admitted to it that, you know, he was recruited just to see staff movements. It just shows you the level of it, and that's, once again, unfortunately it's through a labor broker at the end of the day, and that they've basically planted these sleeper cells, so to say.
We have a question here.
Martin, good morning. I'm Colonel Maswanga from the SAPS at OR Tambo. You are talking about risk and the issue of emails that allows people to come through with their trucks. How are you then, in terms of learning from this previous attempt, mitigate the effect of the use of these emails? Do you develop something to mitigate that factor, because it's still a high risk?
Colonel, in our instance, I guess we're fortunate. We've partnered with the right teams, obviously. So for us, it's not predominantly a land side. So we've got the flexibility, I guess, to go via air side or land side, and that's how we keep it unpredictable. So for us, we might draw cargo directly from air side, or we might draw it land side, just to change it up. Unfortunately, that system, I guess, and that's where also what it mentioned, through the forum that's created, we'll have to see from the industry how we change that. Because historically, it was just on an IVS permit or AXA permit. And yeah, it's unfortunately, even those, it's easy to forge. Card machines are easy accessible, and to get the font and to make a copy, like we've seen in this instance, it's very quick. Any other?
Hi, Olaf from Kuehne+Nagel. You alluded to having a tip-off or a heads-up ahead of the incident. Any methods that you put in place to promote that tip-off lines, reward systems, that kind of thing?
Yeah, without obviously divulging too much information. Obviously, that's I guess part and parcel of key of our success over the last couple of years, is to almost have these sleeper informants amongst all every key operation, so to say, and also to change them. And I guess it's also that these individuals don't know about each other. We're not reliant on a sole source. We might have 2 to 3 sources in a particular operation. That's the only way to mitigate that.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I just want to finish off. So thank you, Martin. Just to quickly add on that one question around the email part. Remember, as a regulated agent in the airport, it is your responsibility also to make sure that you cover your own access control, your security into your own facility. So it's easy to blame the airport's authority and say, how did AXA fail? But in actual fact, the airport's authority did not fail. It's your paperwork that was bypassed into the system, into your own secure facility, because you listed as your own regulated agent. So if you followed the rules and you made sure that you had your own house in order, this was not going to happen. It's very easy to blame the airport's authority and the Civil Aviation Authority and Customs and all of these law enforcement state entities. But the point I'm trying to make is, let's get the basics right from our side first, and the first time right. Thank you. The next speaker, are you going to introduce
Yeah,
him?
thanks, Wade.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and you're absolutely right. I'll agree with you there. And thank goodness the TAPA standards take care of all the problems that we've discussed so far today.